Welcome to Faith into Action podcast. Thanks for joining us today as we navigate faith and our journey with our biblical worldview in today's culture. If you enjoy our podcast, please be sure to like the video, leave comments, and subscribe to our channel. There are links on the YouTube homepage to our social media accounts on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram where you can find more content. Now let's join Eric and Jerry for this week.
Welcome back. So last week's episode was a little cut short. We had some technical difficulties, but you got to meet Eric last week, so that's good. But I want to recap a little bit about what we talked about.
I was thinking, I'm good 7 minutes at a time. I'm palatable
phrases.
7 minutes at a time.
Short increments. Just to recap a little bit, we were talking about dangers, I guess, or the cautions of studying the Bible alone and not having any kind of accountability with it or any kind of growth together. Iron sharpens iron, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of talked about 4 points of the dangers, and one being misinterpretation. That could lead to pride. That pride could lead to self-isolation, and then it could build into some false doctrine that you end up believing. Not with a bad intent to say that you were trying to develop false doctrine, but you were paint yourself into that corner where your misinterpretation of areas lead into false doctrine.
I mean, there's a lot of bad things that happen with good intentions.
Mm-hmm.
So
I've heard the old saying, the pathway to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some life in general is surrounded by millions or billions of decisions and controls. A lot of times we think our life is out of control. Heard it, and I'm speaking really because I heard this yesterday in our sermon at church, is that we got to seize the thing, not seize like take control pridefully, but the things that we can control. We need to make good decisions within those things, if that makes sense. The example was used like, say we went downtown and we end up cheating on our wives, right? This is an extreme scenario. Say I do, but I come to you and Jerry, and I say, Jerry, man, I don't know how this happened. And you'd be like,
You went downtown?
You went downtown, got hammered. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't start out cheating on my wife.
Yeah.
That wasn't my intent.
Started with good intentions of just hanging out with friends.
That's a really extreme
You're
example.
talking about like controlling situation. I was thinking about yesterday, in just real life example. Me and the family were on a way to a work Christmas event yesterday morning, and we're driving down the interstate, and I'm not even gonna lie, I drive fast. Okay, I drive fast on the interstate, and I'm the person that's in the fast lane. And if you want to go the speed limit, stay out of the fast lane. That's for us that are trying to commit a crime.
That are breaking the law. Yeah. That's the lawbreakers.
That's reserved for us. So I'm driving down the interstate, and there's a car behind me. I am going well over the speed limit. Apparently, I was not going fast enough for the person behind me. They passed me and flipped me off. And it made me think about like controlling how you react to things and controlling what you can control. I could have got mad, could have had road rage, whatever, because I thought it was just an extreme reaction. I could have reacted very ungodly, flipped them back off, got in front of them, cut them off or something. I could have had an ungodly reaction to it, or I could have controlled the way I reacted, and it was just like, just waved at them, said, "Have a good day."
Yeah. God bless. Yeah.
Godspeed.
Yeah, Godspeed. God bless, Godspeed. Yeah, I mean, the roads around here are tough. Probably everywhere, I'm guessing, but it seems particularly around here. It tests your witness.
Yeah.
It tests your witness. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does.
church parking lots test your witness. You know, church parking lots.
Especially when you go to a big one. The church that I've been going to, not so much, but
Well, I live by a big one, and I go to well, certainly a big one where where I grew up in, but and we live very close
a
to
mega
to
church.
mega church,
Yeah,
and
we actually joke about it because we have to drive by the mega church every Sunday morning. We're
I'm
like,
so mad that all these people went to church. I'm like,
we're like, if we get started early enough, we can beat them and we can be out of the area before they start coming.
yeah, instead of being like, I'm so glad 10,000 people came to church today.
Right? Yeah, probably anywhere. I'd say in the 5 to 10,000
Yeah,
every
for
weekend.
sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, you put it in context. We really should be celebrating it. You know, I mean, good Lord, if the apostles, who was it? Was it that came down from being flogged and they counted it as joy, and they were being persecuted and flogged, and flogged, by the way, is not what is light as people I
No.
think today think it's like a bag, like a pillow fight.
What was it, like 40 minus 1 is what they, because they
Yeah,
had a number that they said that people usually died from,
yeah,
and they would minus 1, and
minus
that's what,
one.
and just to keep you alive.
Yeah,
I mean, it was pretty torturous. It was about as torturous as you could think.
I mean, we get, like you said, you get mad at traffic, but imagine coming out of that situation and you're you're celebrating in it like it was in the name of Jesus. Like, oh wow. I mean, I don't, I'm trying to get there, man. I'm trying to get there, you know, but we'll see.
It,
Trying.
yeah, it's definitely not as easy as people think it is from the outside, because we get tested a lot in the Christian realm from the world, secular world, about our beliefs, and they try to poke holes in it. I think a lot of times, and try to make us out to be the bad guy.
Well, and we talked, well, that's a good point. We talked a little bit last week, I guess, off camera now that, or not knowing we were off camera.
Right.
But, when we started looking in, that isolation kind of leading you down a path of false doctrine and stuff. The we need to know Bible. We need to know, I think, as we talked about again, that maturity level as second, third time when you start sharpening your iron with other men or other women or other couples, whatever it is, that maturing, because the problem with these hole pokers, that's a terrible name, I guess. There's my country, hole pokers, is that they don't really have a good mature base in the gospel. I don't understand context. They cherry pick lines, and I'm like, I think we mentioned anyway. Hey man, come on, won't you read that chapter? Read the
Right.
verse before it. Read the verse after it. John 3:16 is one of, I agree, it's one of the most beautiful verses in the book. But 17, 15, I mean, they're right there with it.
Yeah, there's a lot
You know what I
of
mean?
beautiful context in it, or
Understanding
around
in
it, I guess.
Jeremiah 20:11 who he's talking to, what's about to happen. You know, it doesn't make anything untrue, but it makes it more full, right? You get that context out of it, and we can go to the web, Facebook or Instagram, and argue with people all day, and they honestly don't even really understand the context and what they're even saying. I had a guy a couple of weeks ago lay out some things about Jesus. Jesus went to parties. Went to parties. Jesus threw parties. And he loved people and blah blah blah. And I almost went down that rabbit trail. And Jesus is all those things. Most of those things for sure. I'm still kind of curious about the parties kind of thing. We talked about that a little bit, you and I think personally. But a lot of those things are true, but they're in true. Jesus loves us no matter what, and I think it grieves the Holy Spirit every time we sin. Like it saddens God when we sin, but He loves us even through our sin. But there is a time that if we are to to activate that grace in our life, that we have to actually believe who he says he is. And if we're given time to act that out through obedience, faith, good works, not to save us, but because we've been saved, you can't, I mean, people kind of circle around the, faith and good works a lot too. But, but Jesus doesn't claim you as you are to leave you there, right?
Right.
It's not like that's not the best version of yourself that you can be. And I say if given time. I mean, we've seen a thief on the cross. You watch God's not dead. There might be that moment at the end, but man, I mean, and I believe Jesus worked all the way up until his death, even with the words on the cross. He was still ministering to people. You know what I mean?
Never
Just
stop.
never stopped. But for those of us that are alive and walking this earth and have breath in us and time left in us, like we can't still be at our
You can't get
save moment.
stuck.
You know what I mean? Like when you
You
get
can't
saved,
get
can't
stagnant.
stay. Yeah.
Yeah, you get stagnant, and I mean, it's.
There's seasons, but we have to be pushing.
I guess the best like analogy of like being stagnant in your journey with Jesus, because Christianity, I think from the secular world, a lot of times looking outside in, they think Christianity is a destination and that you're going to get to this perfect human being
Right.
as a Christian, and you're just going to be completely sanctified, completely righteous in everything you do. Like they think it's a destination, but it's a journey. So in this journey with Jesus, you get stagnant.
Mm.
You can get stagnant. And when you think about stagnant water, like water is the essence of life. But stagnant water, whenever it just sits there, nothing, no action, will become rancid.
Yeah. Become corrupt.
Yeah,
He talks about that with
toxic,
the salt, the salt and the light,
right? You lose your
which were
saltiness.
absolutely beautiful comparisons when he talked about that in Matthew. But once again, in today's time, we're like, what is this? What does salt have to do with anything? But salt, there were wars fought over salt. Salts was wealth. Salts, well, it was wealth because it was the major, not purification. They covered their meat. It
Curing.
curing. There you go. Preservative. There we go. So when he talks about salt, he's like, you got to preserve your faith and not become unsalty. Therefore, you're open for corruption. You're open for delusion of the spirit. Of Scripture. You're open to false doctrine. And again, I'm not saying that some guy living in remote wherever destination can't go in heaven. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's hard. It's hard if you're not surrounding yourself with people that are challenging you, that are challenging you, but also people that are trying to edify you, as we are to edify the church in the name of Jesus. You know what I mean? Like pushing you, keeping you salty, keeping you preserved in at least a good spot where you don't fall to corruption. Corruption is all around us, or sin, whatever you want to call it. But
When you talk about that edification piece, and I think it's something that we lack in the overall realm of a lot of churches and a lot of the experiences that people get from churches, because is it the church's fault or is it the congregation's fault? I mean, that's up for debate, but a lot of times I think people just go into church and they attend and they hear a great sermon and they leave, so they don't open themselves up to have that fellowship where they can get some edification. But on the flip side, when you have people that are involved in the church, sometimes I don't think there is enough edification in the church to build each other up. We fall victim a lot of times to tearing other people down,
we
and
do,
that is, I mean, it's talked about in the Bible numerous times. You get like don't talk.
which makes it hard. Is people out? outside that's not, um, well, even I want to say have a fair maturity. I don't mean like say Christian. I mean just that has some concept of walking a Christian life is, you know, we're not we're we're walking. We will never see perfection until we get to the other side. That makes sense. But we're evil, as I've read it, evil and sin is not going to leave the earth until Jesus himself extinguishes it. You know, so
Right. So he builds his kingdom
until he
here.
builds the kingdom here, right? And we get to live. Those of us that name is written down in Book of Life. I know that if you don't know what I mean, that's a fancy thing you hear in church a lot, but
So
that's important to us to be written in that book. So it might be cheesy to some, but it's important for us to be in that book.
it is.
It is huge. But you know, the church congregation, I mean, that's a whole, and again, when you get in different denominations and different kind of sects of the church, that's where things can get a little spicy, and it shouldn't divide us. You know, I go to a church and we talk about we major on the majors and we minor on the minor. Now we have to define that as a church, so it's not just all willy nilly. Nothing's major. Everything's minor because
And it's
that's
not just one person's opinion of what's
right.
major or
And
minor.
but it's I look at church personally as somewhere I can go and get knowledge and wisdom and a little bit of self correction for the week, and then I seek other avenues out. Fellowship like this. I have a men's group on Tuesday that I depend on those people to lift me up and keep me accountable. Right. That's where
Kind
the
of check.
iron comes in. Right.
Yeah,
The iron.
it's what challenges
So
us.
it's for my Christianity individually. It's a village. It's the pastor with a good message that I can relate to. It's um, 30 men, usually 20 a week, that are challenging great wisdom and good ideas and great perspectives. And these kind of conversations individually, to the whole isolationist thing, I couldn't imagine being in the spot I don't think I could have accomplished that by myself. Like there's no self glory in where I'm at. It was the push pull drag cell, for me, where I I needed to be amongst people trying in the same destinational path, right?
Right.
Direction,
Yeah.
direction. And as I got to see other people's successes and understand more, I was able to create my own path,
Motivates you to find that path
find that
sometimes
path.
when you
Sometimes you
hear
get
or you
stuck.
watch people.
You go through seasons, you get stuck.
I'm,
You had one, but
I,
golly, David had a couple. I mean, you think David is so confusing to can be confusing. A man after God's own heart. Like that should let you know that even in pursuit of God, that you're going to have some stumbles. You are going to make, not God make. You're going to make some bad decisions with life. When I say lifetime on this side, lifetime, not, but they will have eternal. They're going to have immediate now consequences and some spiritual ramifications. But enough enough of our decisions are impacting our, I hate to say spiritual balance, but you know what I mean. That name, I want my name to get written, not one letter at a time, going real slow. You know what I mean? Like, you know, because as a man, we want to know the line. What's the is D for diploma, right? That's how I looked at college. I didn't make D's. I may blow that, but you get what I'm saying. Like we
right.
just
Yeah.
want, what do I got to do?
What's the bare minimum?
And we should be
Sometimes.
wanting to crush that gate open, kick it in.
Right.
But we can't do that alone, and we should be gravitating people with us we should be going so fast, just our movement, which is our witness and our testimony, should be kind of swooping people in that drive. That's to me how I kind of relate it. I don't know how fast I'm going right now. I know that I'm going, which I know I wasn't going, in the past. So that's all that matters.
Even in this year alone, for me, like there was talk to you, and I don't even know what got recorded last week. I can't remember what actually was posted, but like me going completely dark, and I got into that isolation, and I got stagnant,
Hmm.
and I realized I got stagnant. So, and I was getting stagnant, and I was like, I got to do something. I have to put something into action. That action, faith without works is dead. And I knew that my lack of action, lack of work was slowly killing my faith, I guess,
Hmm.
for lack of better terms. Not to say that I wasn't at any point didn't believe Jesus died on the cross. I'm just saying that I wasn't growing. I was getting stagnant. And I knew that's not where I didn't want the journey to stop. I wanted the journey to continue. So I had to take some action and do something. Throughout that, I've had a lot of conversations with my pastor and was corrected on some of my knowledge or some of my readings and stuff like that, which helped guide me away from that false doctrine of misinterpretation,
Sure.
stuff like that. I was encouraged this last week. So in one of my lunch breaks, I was eating lunch at a restaurant. I'm on the road a lot, so I stopped and I was like, you know what? I'm not just gonna get drive through. I'm gonna go in, sit down, just take a break for a little bit. And so I was reading some articles, and I was encouraged this week because I read, and I believe it was in the New York Times. I was encouraged because I read Bible sales were up 22% this year. 22%, and that's physical books being purchased. The books industry was up 1%. So the Bible outperformed by 21%. That's a pretty huge number.
So that 22% was the major part of that
Oh yeah, I mean,
1% by
yeah,
itself.
it would
Yeah.
have skewed that 1% dramatically. But I was encouraged by that because we're talking about false doctrine right now, and it makes me encouraged that people are actively purchasing the book that's going to tell them the truth.
Hmm.
Whether they're reading the book or not, that's a different subject for another time, but they are getting that tool in front of them. And I think that's vitally important because I think about the parable of the talents a lot.
Mm.
And to be honest, the parable of the talents is one of my favorite parables. And to put it into context here, you know, if me and you were born in 1725, we'd probably never see a physical Bible outside of maybe if we lived somewhere where there was a church that we could go to, you know, and if we did, we'd probably see the physical Bible that the pastor or preacher had, but we wouldn't have our hands on
Wouldn't be reading it.
it. Definitely wouldn't be
We
reading
definitely
it.
wouldn't.
And to be
Maybe
honest,
we couldn't read. I
yeah,
mean, even yeah.
educationally,
Right.
we may not be educated enough to even be able to be literate enough to read it. And we're in a culture today where in my house alone, I'm going to say we have at least 10 Bibles, probably, if not more. I have different versions, I mean, NIV, King James, NLT, ESV, chronological Bible, study Bibles, and we have all these tools at our fingertips. So, in context with the parable of the talents, like we weren't given one talent, we were given five.
A lot, yeah.
And we have a responsibility with those 5 talents. And then the 5 talents will be in like we have the entire world's knowledge at our fingertips, just on our phone alone. Like you can access just about anything And we have a responsibility to do something with that, to read, to study, to purchase the Bible, to be able to have it, because we have, I mean, especially here in the U.S., we are spoiled beyond measure with financially, even, what we consider poverty here versus what other countries consider poverty is night and day.
Right.
And we see some people taking some action to get their hands on the Bible, the scripture, and to read it and learn it. So I read that article in the New York Times, and I read another one, I think it was Christianity Daily, I believe, and it was talking about how for the first time in, I think it was, and I could be wrong on this, but I think it was close to 100 years, Gen Z, men are outnumbering women in the church, which is mind-boggling to me, but I think is a huge thing, because I've talked about it. I think I've talked about it on the podcast before, but I know I've talked about it with numerous friends. I think one of the hugest faults of the world today is a lack of men being men
Mm-hmm.
and leading. I think it just leads down so many negative things because women can't trust men. They don't trust men to lead them, and rightfully so. I mean, we have put ourselves in that position. So you see men actually getting involved in church. People are buying more Bibles. I think it's some positive encouragement on the U.S. culture.
Mm-hmm. But I do think that men in general, their lack of being men. I'm not saying sexually. I'm just saying if you got man that's a man, a, 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 a biblical male,
Courageous leader.
courageous, leading, praying with his family, tucking his kids in at night, you know, not being absent is what I'm saying, being present. I think I think we can as a gender can do so much for the culture today. I mean, we it's so misunderstood and so overplayed just out of misunderstanding how important the man is in life or in culture in anything. And to do that and to regain that biblical role back would would be enormous to our families, to our overall culture, to health of our nation, to everything.
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 I do a lot of reading and a lot of studying because I mean I do travel with work a lot. So sometimes I'm in a hotel room and I'll read article after article, or I'm reading books and stuff like that. And one of the articles I read in the last several months was talking about the highest percentage of an ethnicity that is in prison per capita is also the highest without fathers at home.
Mm-hmm. I,
And
I
I
find
100%
I find no coincidence.
no, oh yeah, definitely not. If you don't have somebody, you don't, a mother can, mothers have done so much for our country. Particularly, let's just talk about the last 50 years because of
Mm-hmm.
the absence of men in the last 50 years. Mothers have done more than they should have ever been required to do. But no mother can be a mother and a father, and no
Right.
father can be a father and a mother.
Right.
Like we can't do it as a male, and a woman can't do it as a woman. You can't be both parents.
I mean, it's almost like we force them to act outside themselves because we wouldn't, and they stepped up. They stepped up when we stepped down.
Hmm.
You know, but I mean, a great example is I serve on the board of a local nonprofit women's shelter, and I visit the shelter. I would say fairly often. I do some maintenance and things there too. I'm a volunteer, so I'm in there mainly in that capacity. Being on the board doesn't really require me to be there in the board capacity. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you would think what the misconception is, it's a homeless shelter for women and women with children. So 95% of our volunteer staff is all women. But let me tell you who the children are running to and clinging to when they walk through the door, and that's the men. The and any man, because they're missing that. Once again, the moms have been in a spot that they've had to do what they've had to do, not pulling that away from them, but they've been asked to do more than they should.
Oftentimes they are trying to be both parents. They're working two jobs to build
Yep.
pay because reality in America today is hard in general for most families to get by on one income.
Right.
So when you eliminate one of the people drawing or providing income, then the other person ends up working two jobs to do the income. So whatever, if it's the mother that is doing it, or if it's a father that's raising their family alone, but you end up working two jobs, so you're absent, a lot. So these kids aren't getting the adequate parental guidance, and then it leads to girls looking for male affection as
Mhm.
they grow up. Men or boys as they grow up, they're looking for male approval, and that's where you end up with gang involvement or whatever, or you end up with them looking for something to fill that void, and they end up on drugs, alcohol, some outlet
Mhm.
to try to fill that void.
I mean, we're to. I think we're to teach our daughters. You have daughters.
Mm-hmm.
We're to teach our daughters the type of man that they should want by watching us and how we love them. There's something very unique because I have one of each. It's very unique about. They want to know which one I love more. Which
Oh
you
yeah, I
love
mean
me,
that's
but I'm like I don't. But it is. There's a common love, but it's also so unique to each child. There's just something so sweet and so beautiful about a daughter's love as a father. And there's something so rugged and tough and in the same kind of way, but with a different skin on it about a son, you know? And, even whoever catches my daughter's eye is going to have his run for his money because he's going to he's going to spend a lot of time trying to love that girl more than I did. You know what I mean?
that is.
But at the same time, my son should be witnessing how to treat a lady,
Mhm.
right? And you can't get both spectrums with one parent of either side, and say likewise on a woman's side, on the wife or on the mother's side.
The daughter will be learning how to love a husband based on how the mother, and the son will be learning what they should expect to receive as love. The way I love my wife, I expect whoever that wants to date my daughters in the future to treat my daughters the way I treat my wife, if not better.
Yeah.
And I treat my wife like a queen.
Well, I love the fact that even I don't. There's certain levels of arguments as well, but I do love. Um, we do try. I mean, we've had some, probably maybe everybody once or twice has had big blow up arguments. But for the baseline debates and the small arguments, I love. Even if it hurts our feelings and they know that one of us has hurt the other's feelings, I want them to see that reconciliation moment as well. If that
Hmm.
makes sense. Now the bigger stuff, heavier topics, I like to reserve those. Hey, kids, go outside and play, or we know if it's getting in a spot that's just over their maturity level. But I want them to be able to see most aspects that they're ready for of how we operate, if that makes sense. If we get in a tiff and say some things, I want them see me coming to mom and apologize. I want them seeing mom coming to me, and I want them to see us have that reconciling moment,
That two-way.
that two-way realignment, right? And it's just sad though. I mean, if you don't, once again, like every time I've been left on my own to make not wise because I had no experience in them, but to make unexperienced, you know, no firsthand evidence of how things can be done. When I've been left alone to make some decisions, because I grew up fairly consistently in a single mother or a single parent house. When I'm left alone with no perspective or no eyewitness accounts to base anything on, even the bad stuff, just really no knowledge of how to pursue through life, I've made poor decisions.
Oh, I
Um,
will second that because I was on a pretty dang good path until my parents got divorced. And when I'm left to my own vices,
mm,
and I became a train wreck quick. Like, I mean, I went down like the Titanic. I mean, I was a beautiful ship sailing across the sea. And, 2 hours later, I'm at the bottom of the sea. Like, it did not take long
you
for
got
it.
DiCaprio, I guess.
Yeah, it did not take long for me when I'm left to my own devices to make terrible decisions. And I was lucky I did grow up with both parents in the house for the majority of my childhood. And it was near the end of high school when my parents separated and got a divorce. And yeah, I mean, I went off the rails hard. And I think any average person growing up in those environments, you're gonna make bad decisions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm almost 42 and I still make bad decisions. So I'm still not smart enough to
I'm
make
trying to think how many did I make today? You know,
still not smart enough to make the great decisions every day. And these young kids, you think you know more than you do a lot of times, especially mid late teens. I thought I knew a lot, and looking back, I'm like, woo. If I'd only done this or if I'd only done that,
right,
what better position would I be in today? But, I can't say that I can't say I regret everything that I did because even though I made a lot of bad decisions, I can't live in that. I can't get stuck in those regrets. And most of those bad decisions ended up leading me down paths that got me here today.
right. I have a have a hard time with regret, for instance. Not that I'm not remorseful over some, and I'm sorry and need forgiveness over past things, but I'm kind of fairly not afraid, but like I don't know if I would be exactly where I'm at if those things would change, right? If I could go back and butterfly effect somehow change, I just man, and the spot I'm in is not perfect. It's not. I think realizing it's never going to be perfect, but it feels good. It feels right. It feels right where I'm supposed to be, even when things continually sometimes to go this way or that way. But once again, we can come back to the doctrine side of it. I think I think I think Romans 8:28 didn't apply to me then. It applies to me now because I'm seeking Jesus and I'm trying to live in the path. Regardless, I feel like I'm waving in and out of it, but He's reconciled me individually to Him, and He's went in the past and took some of those poor decisions, and I think eternally rerouted some of those consequences. I still suffered in the day for for secular and civil consequences. Right? It's hard to escape those sometimes,
All right.
but I know I had a lot to do with that. Don't blame God. right? Like he wasn't the one, right?
Right.
I wasn't seeking him. He was actually giving me exactly what I was asking. He 100% fulfilled my request during that time. But now, he's not a, he doesn't, he's not holding it against me, right?
Working all things together for the
Together,
good.
good, right? And
Yeah.
it again, understanding gospel. That's a verse we love to throw around and put on things and kind of. It's very rich. It's very deep. It's very
It is.
meaningful. It's it's a mature verse to understand. It is very simple in its meaning, but for me to activate that verse into my life truth, I need to be in God. I need to be pursuing God.
I th-
Does that make sense?
when I look at that verse and I think about my own life, had it not been for all my mistakes, I would not have ended up living where I live. I would not have ended up meeting my wife. I would not have ended up with my daughters. I would not have ended up the church that I was been highly involved in, and I would not have learned to use my say you there's the different love languages, and
Mm-hmm.
mine is acts of service, and I would not have been able to use those acts of service as my love language of learning how to do that as a servant to God.
Mm.
And but so when I think about that verse, I think about my life a lot of times and how he took every train wreck of a disaster, everything that should have just, I mean, been, I mean, he should have written me off,
Mm.
but he worked it out. So I'm here starting a podcast, one of my best friends, and talking about Jesus.
Mm.
And 10, 15 years ago, if you'd have met me then, you'd have like, that guy will never be talking about Jesus
Uh,
with people.
I mean, I promise you, before this thing is over with, we'll have some people watching just to see if we spontaneously combust into fire.
Anybody that knew us, right?
I mean, that's how good God is. He's a jealous God. Once again, oh, misunderstood and overstated in its misuse. He's jealous. He doesn't. I don't want anybody else to love my wife in my capacity. You know what I mean? I
Right,
don't want I don't want anybody else to love my children in my capacity as their father.
right,
You know, they can love them in their own capacity. I don't want as their father, as her husband. I am jealous. Not jealous where she can't go out of the house. It's not that jealous, but I don't want anybody else
to fulfill your
to
role.
fulfill my love role for them. And he's that kind of he wants you. He wants your love.
He just wants a relationship.
He wants your love. Honestly, it wouldn't mean nothing to him if it was mechanical or it was lack of choice,
Right.
right? That's not really love anyone. That's more like
It's like, if God just made everything perfect for us every moment of every day and everything, and we
why
didn't,
would we need God?
and we didn't have free will, and He just made every decision for us. Well, then it's not pure love that we have for Him. It's a purchased love. It's I guess, a designed love, for
Hmm.
lack of better words.
Right.
It's not a pure love. I mean, if you're dating somebody and you just shower them with gifts and give them everything they want, yeah, they stay with you because they're getting everything they want. But do they love you for even in the hard, in the bad, through it all?
When those gifts stop
Yeah. And
or slow down or
and does that change that love
right.
then? And that I think of that same analogy kind of with God. If God just made me, my life absolutely 100% perfect. Yeah, I love God. God's great. But then I lose a loved one.
Right. I'll be honest with you. If he did that to me, I wouldn't be very likable of a person, to be honest.
Right, probably
I
not.
wouldn't individually
Yeah, and you'd be unrelatable to other people.
unrelatable. I wouldn't be. I'm yeah, the unpleasant guy. I think, and I know that sounds counterintuitive. I fully believe if I had it made, I'd be alone. To be honest, wouldn't have a choice but to be isolated. So how do we tie this back? You're the
So
director here.
we're
How do we?
talking about just the false doctrine, I guess. Um,
Well,
I guess
you got to know the scripture.
you
To
do, and we're seeing the Bible purchases up 22%. So people are starting to want to know or
Do you
wanting to
not
know the
feel that
scripture.
though? Do you not feel? I talk to believers, and I say
I,
believers. That's another word we use. That there's an angst. That there's a little bit of
so
level of anxiety to
culturally,
to get into. I finally feel like we're getting to our wits' end.
so I'm glad you said that because there was something that I thought about like bringing up like throughout the podcast, and I want to keep this to like an hour, so we got like less than 10 minutes left. But I kind of felt that way as we went through election. You saw like a lot of anxiety, and a lot of people were like, "I'm just not happy.
Hmm.
I don't know where to find truth." And you saw a lot of people turning away from like legacy media, turning towards podcasts,
Hmm.
YouTube, reading their own articles, doing their own research, stuff like that. And I think it's this. I talked about it in a recent podcast about like America wanting change, and then we're seeing, and I think, how do I want to say this? So I think it's culturally we're seeing people want to know the truth.
Hmm.
We're seeing that because you see people ratings at MSNBC are record low, huge layoffs. CNN are having layoffs because their viewership is lower. People are saying that they can't true. I personally have watched a lot of Fox News, and I will say I went off on a soapbox speech to my wife the other morning while we're getting ready, and they did a stat, and they had how much money was spent on this thing in 2023, and they compared it to the amount of money that was spent on World War One. A lot of references, but all the references were over 50 years ago, and I'm like, that's apples and oranges. $1 in 2024 versus $1 in 1965 is not the same,
Yeah.
and so it's
Did they do the
skewed.
increase for that?
Yeah, it's very skewed. So it's like even like what I have always referred to as my most trusted news source, which is I still take it with a grain of salt. I don't feel like I'm getting accurate truth. So you set, you build that, you get this cultural movement of people going towards podcast and going towards internet and doing their own research. You add that with the fact that Bible sales are up 22%. People are searching for truth, not false doctrine. Not they don't want to be lied to anymore. They you have seen a lot of people moving away from some of these mega churches with hyper grace. People are saying, I want to know more about Jesus, and it's not always just don't tell me what I just want to hear, but help me learn.
I was sitting here thinking, oh man, and I use it a lot, and I don't even know the name, but I was with you. I was watching a lot of one particular station, and it about made me manic, even though I agreed with it. Like I was, you know, we we need to ingest a little bit of everything, and I would only thing I would say to people is like we can even do that with our podcast though and our YouTubes. If we're at some point we need to break outside.
If all you listen to is Joe Rogan, you probably don't understand the full truth. You know,
I like Rogan though. I mean,
I love some Joe Rogan, but it's not the full truth of everything.
right,
You know,
right. Look for some sort of media platform that maybe combines sources that gives you a Fox, CNN perspective or New York Post, New York Times comparison. I think the biggest issue I run into, though, even saying that as a suggestion, is they all don't report necessarily on the same things.
yeah, it's kind of
It's
hard
like they
sometimes.
kind of cherry pick what suits their already, and I'm going to say fanatical for the reason is, I'm I'm a s- I'm a lo- I do I hate even saying I love football. I really enjoy watching football, but I'm not a fanatical about football where I'm going to miss any life instance to catch a UT game or a Titans game. Like there are certainly priorities lower than that.
Especially Titans games this year.
Especially, well, that's an easy one. Yeah, made it easy on us. I'd say what their sales are down. But my point, you know what I
Yeah,
mean. My point
yeah.
is, and we talked about it last week. I wish it made it though. It I don't mind hearing. I really would like to hear a different perspective because here's why. Either that's going to because I want to know. I want to be right about what I believe. Not more right than what you're right, what you think you're right. I want to have the correct understanding. And so either whoever, either their information that they're laying out is going to sharpen me either more or it's going to make me aware even more I guess what could be what I believe to begin with, right? And then at least I'm understanding what their argument is, right? And I can study. I'm saying because for instance, if you just believe one way and I believe one way, say you're a left and I'm a right, and all we do is argue the right and you argue the left, we're never drawing closer to each other. I want to know why you hang here. And may I share why I hang here and we not yell at each other and maybe something gets across. Not all of it has to, but I think I can be stronger out of that. Not
You-
stronger to argue. I'm saying I think again, I think that even sharpens me, to be honest with you.
So you're talking about being like having correct knowledge. I had a coworker that I worked with previously in another role, and I tend to lean pretty hard right
Mhm.
in most of my views, and this coworker leaned about as extreme left as I could imagine. But one of my best friends at that job, and I love to have conversations with this individual because they would bring their perspective and they were open to my perspective, and we would just listen to each other. And it may not change our views on stuff, but we understood why the other side or an individual from the other side felt that way or their experiences led them that way. So it made me more knowledgeable
Mhm.
without, and it may have shaped some of my views on stuff. I mean, I can't think of an instance right off the top of my head because I wasn't prepared to think about it. But, I think it's important for us to be open to listening.
Well,
Maybe not changing our
everybody has
beliefs,
their
but
circumstance of how they drew to a conclusion and past experiences at home, growing up, abuse, one parent, two parents, adopted, non-adopted, molestation,
I mean,
maybe just seemingly had no issues and super rich or super poor. Right.
everybody's experiences are going to be completely different.
And I find more with adults today that seem now I'm going to kind of get into the biblical perspective of it is that we we gravitate sometimes, and I say we, right, collectively, not necessarily either you or I or anybody there, but we gravitate sometimes to bad doctrine out of feelings that choices our kids are making, choices that maybe
Hmm.
maybe our even our spouses are going a different direction, right?
Or friends.
Or friends. I don't want to lose his friendship. Well, my I think my pastor said, and Corey, you ever watch this? Corey, forgive me. You ought to love them enough that they don't go to hell. Because if you're not giving them some edge of the truth, and you're allowing them to live, you're basically granting them a path
Then you
to hell.
don't love them.
Right.
You don't
You don't. Right.
What did I say last week? The one of the sayings that I think I have coined is, don't let compassion be confused with concession.
Oh yeah.
And you concede your belief because your spouse is wanting to do one thing or another, or your children or your friends or whatever. You concede your belief out of what you think is compassion, and that compassion is not helping them.
Jesus was the best I've ever seen. Well, not seen. Well, I've kind of seen him through the words, and obviously he would be the best at whatever he did. But you kind of get my point. If you want to know how to do that, just read the red letters. You know what I mean? Like he met everybody exactly where they were at, in the sin and the debauchery and the health stricken. He met them. He had compassion for them. But if I may, even before all of his miracles, I am ultimately convinced that God was more worried about their spiritual health than anything physical. Although he granted a lot of physical healing to further his gospel. I don't think he had to grant any miracles for the gospel to be true. But he did but he, like, go sin no more.
Oh,
You know what I mean, right?
You took the word out of my mouth. I was like waiting for the opening. Go and sin no more.
I'll give you the water of life, and you'll thirst no more.
Yeah.
So quit sleeping around.
Yeah.
Quit.
Go and sin no more. And Paul told us, like, how many times did he tell us, just stop. Just stop sinning. And we're always going to sin, but stop just getting caught into it and not grow.
What's cut off your. Well, I might have said, I'm trying to think left or right.
Yeah.
But cut off
your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off.
And we make that as a huge metaphor in church. But I'll be honest with you, I'd rather you cut your arm off than go to hell. If it comes down to it, I think we can do a lot more.
Yeah,
we can do a lot more. Please don't.
We're not condoning self-mutilation.
No,
here.
But my point is, I'd rather you be old Nubby Jerry than Hellbound Jerry.
We'd rather be friends in heaven with me being Nubby Jerry than.
I think you're gonna get your arm back. You know what I mean?
Than me having that eternal separation from God.
If this. My kitty cat,
so cute.
You can comment about that. But if this or this, do something about it. That is actually a control. We can control those things. Get rid of it. Get rid of it.
I love that. So I think this would be a great breaking point for the week. The controlling, and what do we do to help ourselves control, or what actions do we take? I think that's where we want to maybe go into next week. Appreciate the conversation today. I think it was good.
I don't know who's out there, but as we get people, leave us comments, leave us questions. I don't care how silly, how tough you might think it is. Send an email directly. If it's something you don't want to put online.
If you know us, we're open to it. We'll do that as well. And I think every week it's going to be a lot of just open, candid conversation.
It's going to be a very safe place to share ideas. And to get to the truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we'll grow through the podcast as well, and we'll see how we want to continue to develop.
Might have to do some outtakes. I got juiced after the camera went on. We had some good stuff.
Right. So maybe we need to set up a second recording of after we stop and just see what happens after
Stop publishing, but keep recording.
Right.
Just in case.
Maybe we'll just start doing that on the phone or something. But thanks for joining us, and we'll catch y'all next week.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope you got something out of this message for your spiritual growth. If you enjoyed the message, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video, and leave comments. Be sure to follow us on social media on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram by searching Faith into Action Podcast. God bless, and we hope you have a great week. See you next week.